Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Doing all right. We're clearly also in preseason mode, as I flubbed it. I'll own up.
We're only on take 2, so I would actually say this is regular season form.
As far as you guys know,
I was gonna say preseason form, we'd have to be getting on to take 6, take 7. This is pretty standard operating procedure for us.
We
to be
are
on take
in
2
the
or 3.
zone now, listeners. Only managing to do so far only in take 2. We'll see if this changes as we go along.
Yeah, so we are in preseason form. The Packers are also in preseason. It's preseason time for them. We officially have some actual on-the-field stuff to talk about. Preseason week 1. Packers played the Browns just on Saturday. We are here to talk to you a little bit about what we saw that we liked, what we saw that we think the Packers might need to improve, and everything in between in terms of training camp battles, players that we thought did well, players that we thought didn't do well. So we're going to be talking all about that game today. Before we do, though, did want to talk a little bit about, some housekeeping stuff. If you like what you hear here today, subscribe, whether that's on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, hit the bell, leave a comment, leave a rating. We would really appreciate it. It would really help our numbers. And then, let us know what you think, what we can do better, what we can do worse. I don't know. I kind of lost the plot there. But anyway, yeah, subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. And then follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes, stats that we find when we're doing research for these episodes, content from other Packers content creators that we like, injury updates, roster updates, etc., etc. One-stop shop and everything Titletown. That's at FatherSonPacker on Twitter once again. But yeah, give us a follow. We'd love to, chat it up, talk about the Packers with y'all. And then also, we have a few bits of news in terms of Packers roster moves and some injury report stuff to touch on before we start talking about the Brown stuff, unfortunately. Starting off with the roster moves, though, the Packers add linebacker Chris Russell and running back Nate McCrary and cut long snapper Peter Bowden, who this is unfortunately the second time he's been cut by the Packers this summer, and then also cut safety Tyler Coyle. So a couple of moves there, bringing in a new linebacker because they're a bit thin at linebacker right now, and also bringing in a new running back because they're a bit thin at running back right now. Dad, any thoughts on those two moves at all? Mostly depth pieces, I'm guessing. They kind of feel like they're just going to be more like bodies, but camp bodies rather, that is. But obviously, they have the opportunity to prove that they are more.
Right. And I guess McCrary, who had been on the Packers a little bit before, was in the UFL.
Yeah, he was
had a good season.
UFL, had a nice season for them. So yeah, and he was in camp with the Packers last offseason, I believe. So there's a little bit of familiarity there with the scheme, with some of the coaches. So that's good for him as well. Moving on over to the injury report, though, and why some of these players were signed. We do have some good news. A few players returned limited since the last time we talked, and that was Carrington Valentine, Jordan Morgan, Donovan Jennings, Tyron Hopper, and Deslin Alexander were all back in some fashion this week, practicing in limited capacity, mostly individual drills for them, not in team yet, but good to see them working their way back. And then we did have one player return to team activities, and that was Tucker Kraft. After, mostly being in individuals previously, working back from that torn pec, he was back in 11-on-11 work, so good to see him progressing. Did have some new names on the injury report, though, unfortunately. Running back Marshawn Lloyd sustained a hamstring injury against the Cleveland Browns in that game after pretty much one run, which is really unfortunate for him. And then running back Jarvian Howard didn't exit that game, but came out of that game the next day with an ankle injury, unfortunately. So a couple of running backs down, which kind of makes sense why they brought McCrary in. And then some players who are still out right now are Edgerrin Cooper and Keyshawn Banks. And so with Edgerrin Cooper out and Tyron Hopper still working his way back, kind of makes sense why they brought Chris Russell in as a linebacker to fill those spots. Those are pretty much the main updates on the injury report. We'll keep you posted on anything on Twitter and going forward on these episodes. But yeah, so it's good to see some players working back. Unfortunately, some rookies missing some time when obviously these are the times that are most important for their development, is learning the playbook, getting some reps under their belt. Hopefully they can all be back soon, but we'll keep an eye on that going forward. Dad, that kind of does it for our news and notes section, though. Should we just jump right into talking about this Browns game? Because I've been looking forward to, we've each probably watched this game, I think 4 times now. And I've been looking forward to talking about this with you, and we've already talked a little bit off air, but we each brought, I think, a few things to the table. But let's start off with our players of the game, because we're still working our way back into our our regular routine of doing game breakdowns and stuff like that. But we do like to have an offensive and a defensive player of the game each. Dad, who was your player of the game on offense?
So I chose Grant DuBose because
has to be. You stole him from me. I was thinking about it.
I did. Well, this is, like I said, the advantage of creating the summary doc first.
Yes.
Getting my notes in the beginning. So he caught 5 of 6 targets for 66 yards to lead the team in both receptions and yards. And also he had some good blocking, contributing a nice block ahead of Wilson's TD run.
Yeah. And I mean, he looked good blocking. He did have one time where he was like jammed off the line really, really hard. But I mean, he led the team and he also forced a holding penalty as well in terms of that.
Yeah, you could tack on another 30 yards to his total.
With that. He might have broken 100 yards there if they hadn't just grabbed his jersey and taken him down. But he looked good. I think we'll talk a little bit about him later when we're talking about wide receiver battle stuff. But he's, I think, currently probably ahead of Malik Heath right now. He actually was today, Wednesday, as we record this, he was the starting receiver opposite Christian Watson in first walkthroughs for the offense. So it's just walkthroughs. That doesn't necessarily mean a ton, but it's definitely, indicative of the fact that, I mean, he had a really good day and multiple third down conversions, multiple big plays. I mean, blocking really well for that Bo Melton end around that he fumbled. He was laying a really good block there. So that's awesome as well. He had a really good day.
Yeah, and so, and I'll talk a little bit more about him later, but I think he's trending up.
Yeah, definitely trending up. He might even be battling for that wide receiver 5 spot, honestly, but we'll keep an eye on that going forward. My player of the day on offense was, this might come as a shock to you, Dad, because I have been a doubter of this player, Sean Rhyan. I was thoroughly impressed, and, it's just one preseason game. Keep in mind for all of this that the Cleveland Browns were playing just 5 starters. They were not playing any of their starting front 4. They were only playing one of their starting linebackers. And then when we talk about defense, they were only playing 2 of their starting linemen. Neither tackle were playing, and then their left guard was also not playing. So mostly going against backups, but I thought Sean Rhyan acquitted himself really awesomely. He played really well at right guard and center, so showing some positional versatility for him is awesome, and his ability to play center. He allowed no pressures on the day, which is great for him, especially across 2 positions. I just thought he looked way more nimble than he had previously. He looked so much more agile side to side. His just lateral agility was way better than I thought it looked last year. And obviously, it's just one preseason game going against mostly backups. But I was impressed. No pressures allowed, pulled really well in run blocking, opened up some nice lanes for Emmanuel Wilson. I was really impressed with Sean Rhyan, and I just wanted to shout him out as my player of the game because I've been critical of him previously and have been like, "Ooh, do you really want him playing out there? Is he going to get passed by Jacob Monk? Is he going to get passed by Royce Newman?" He really answered the bell in this game, and I think was, for me, the best player on offense over the course of the game.
Oh, on all offense.
Yeah, that's what he was the most impressive player for me on offense.
And this might be one of the better games of his career.
I think so.
Preseason or regular season?
I think for sure. Let's move on over to the defensive side of the football, though, Dad. Who is your defensive player of the game for the Packers?
So I went with Evan Williams.
Yep, great choice.
Low-hanging fruit. He led the team in tackles, maybe tied for lead with 6 total tackles, and he had no missed tackles.
Yep.
And he forced a fumble, or at least was one of the people who forced the fumble for the only turnover of the game.
Yep.
Getting a shoulder in on the ball.
I mean, his tackling specifically was incredibly impressive. I mean, anytime you can bring a guy to the ground without your own helmet on, that's a feather in your cap, so to speak.
He did not give up even though he lost his helmet.
Yeah, I mean, he had 5 solo tackles in like a little over a half of football. I mean, he was all over the place. And
he looks like he has a nose for the ball, to be in on the play all the time, which says something about his instincts about where the ball is going to go, so that he's in there, or his hustle, or both.
It is such a cliche, but he is just a football player. There was one play where early in the first half, I think it was when the starters were still out there. It was a play action bootleg right, and he comes down a little bit, and then realizes it's a play action, starts running to the right sideline, turns and looks over his shoulder, sees the guy coming across that he's supposed to be covering, backs up to him. Then the ball goes to the guy who's, trailing the next crosser in the next level, comes back to him and makes the tackle. And I'm just like, that's just, football IQ. You've been playing on this team for what? Well, I guess a little longer if you include rookie minicamp and OTAs, but you haven't been playing in the league very long, and you just read that out perfectly, and you were in every single spot that you were supposed to be. And I think that was my big takeaway. It seemed like the entire game he knew exactly where he was supposed to be, and he was getting to his spots, and he was finishing plays. And I was really impressed with Evan Williams for sure.
Yeah, he just showed good form in his tackling, ability to get up to the sideline after the ball. I think I remember the play you were saying where he sprints out to the sideline to get in on the play, to make the play.
Yeah. For me, my player of the game, Evan Williams, definitely a great choice. On defense, though, was Lucas Van Ness. And like I said, they were only playing two of their starting linemen and neither of their starting tackles. He's just so freaking strong. He is just so absurdly strong. Like, there's a reason his nickname is Hercules. And he was throwing guys around. Some numbers for you. 14 pass rush snaps. He had 4 pressures, including a sack. So that conversion rate is insane. And then in 9 run defense snaps, he had 2 stops. So they just had no answer for him. There was one time they tried blocking him with the tight end. Teams are not going to be able to do that. He is going to throw whatever tight end you put against him, except for maybe George Kittle, maybe Mercedes Lewis. He's going to throw every single other one of them out of the club. Like, he is just way too strong. They're going to need to be putting tackles on him going forward now that he's put this on tape. But he was a man amongst boys, so to speak, out there. But yeah, he was my choice. And then honorable mention for me was Devontae Wyatt, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But he just didn't play quite as much as Van Ness did. And they actually said that they had Van Ness play more because, what was it? Because he got like just such a limited role at Iowa and then didn't play a whole lot last year. They just wanted to get him a lot of reps in the preseason just because, he hasn't played a ton of football in the past couple of years. But yeah, I thought he looked quite good out there.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting if he steps up this year. He could. We could be starting to look at a Gary Van Ness, dynamic duo on the edges,
which is exciting. And probably what they had in mind when they invested such a high pick in him. And it's good to see him progress as a guy who was first half of the first round pick. Like, that's a pretty primo pick.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to pay off, especially if you can, force teams to devote extra resources to him on the edge.
Yeah. But anyway, so those have been our players of the game. Dad, what was your first takeaway overall, though? It can be a generic thing. It can be another player. What was your first takeaway overall from the game?
My first takeaway overall?
Sure. Well, or whichever one you want to start with.
So one of the things that I had said before the game or before the preseason started was I want to look at the run game. And so the first thing is they struggled to run the ball in short yardage.
Just like last year, they struggled.
And I think it's like, I just said we were going to look at this, and I'm watching this. It's like three plays in a row where they can't get any movement, they can't open any lanes, and Dillon can't create.
Yeah, it's not just one person. It's not just Dillon. It's not just the line. It's a combination of the two. And we saw it a lot last year where the line was not able to create holes for him, and then he was not able to create anything for himself. And then when Jones came, Jones was able to create for himself, and everything looked better. But for Dillon, it's like, if you get 3 tries at 1 yard, I get that the blocking isn't great. Sometimes you just got to lower your shoulder and just drive through the guy, right? Like, it seemed like he was chopping his feet. He was thinking too much about, like, oh, here comes a guy, like, in the hole. Sometimes, like, hey, you weigh as much as the linebackers in this league do. And you have forward momentum. Just lower your shoulder and go through him.
Yeah, I think he doesn't necessarily keep his forward momentum going. But that was sort of the run game as a whole, and especially short yardage situations, which is where they've seemed to have struggled a lot. In first downs, with both Jacobs and Lloyd were able to make decent gains in the early downs.
Yeah,
they each had basically like one opportunity. Now Lloyd had to bounce outside because there's nothing inside to make extra, and Jacobs had a
and nice we know Lloyd will bounce it outside sometimes, even when he doesn't need to bounce it outside. So I think he was okay with doing that.
This was a success. He bounced outside and held all the ball, though unfortunately he seems to have aggravated injury that he said he kind of was already bothering him a little bit. And the backups looked good. But of course, they're playing against even deeper backups. Both Wilson and Howard looks good. Now, overall, for the game, their run blocking grade by PFF was 11th in the league for the week. So they're in the, about top third. Which
it would be an improvement over last year if they were able to run block that well.
And then on the flip side, looking at the defense, I felt like they mostly looked good with the starters. Slayton was standing up to some double teams, and McDuffie was like running all over the place, attacking ball carriers. Also against the pass, but against the run as well. So I think they were like middle of the pack, maybe 14th or 15th on run defense by PFF, but it's looking encouraging so far with early returns. So it's always a little bit hard to tell when it's like, okay, the grade of our backups against their backups looks pretty good.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is like they're going against backups, but to be fair, these are a lot of our backups. But the big talking point from this game, right? What most people are discussing is the Emmanuel Wilson, AJ Dillon. Whether or not that should be a conversation, whether or not that should be a competition.
I could go on to that because I have extensive notes.
I was going to say
to continue on with the running back battle.
I think it dovetails very well into it because, like you were saying, we were looking at going into this game. What the running game looks like, what the run defense looks like. But I think coming out of this game, what a lot of people are talking about, and which I figure, hey, let's throw our 2 cents in there as well, is, should Emmanuel Wilson be ahead of AJ Dillon on the depth chart? And now my initial answer to that is you can't make that decision based on one preseason game. Should it be a conversation if at the end of the preseason Wilson is looking better? I think there's no reason it shouldn't be. Wilson is younger. He's cheaper. He has more years of contract control. And to be honest, at the end of last year, I feel like Wilson was running better than Dillon. But at the same time, I don't want to, take too much away when, from all reports, Dillon has had a really good set of training camp practices. But at the same time, it is hard to, conversely, like Wilson just looked a lot better in this game, for sure.
Yeah, so I think the very least we should say is it should still be on the table.
Yes.
Wilson having the opportunity to get ahead of Dillon. Let's not say it's done yet because there's, it's one game and they didn't get opportunities in the same contexts.
Yeah.
But Wilson had another big performance in the game to lead the team with 67 yards on 13 carries. After, I think, last year leading the league in preseason rushing yards.
Yeah, and I mean, 67 yards, 13 carries, over 5 yards a carry. I mean, that's a really good day.
Yeah, and I looked at his success rate. I just manually went through all the plays, and success rate being 40% of the yards to go on first down, 60% on second down, and, getting the first down or touchdown on third or fourth down.
Yeah.
And his success rate for the game was 61.5%.
Which
context,
is very good.
That is very good. So how good that is context, it would have been second in the league last year and first in 2022. So among running backs last year, Aaron Jones actually led the league at 62% last year, and Kyren Williams was second at 59.6%. This is from ProFootballReference.com. Last year, Dillon was at 50%. He was, and Jacobs was only 45.9%. Jacobs was second in the league in 2022 at 57.4, and Dillon was fifth in 2022 at 56.5.
Yeah.
So that gets, but Wilson had a good success rate, and not the best in the league for like the week, but still quite good. He also had 3.85 yards after contact per attempt per carry, which was 12th best in the league in week one, at least among running backs with at least 3 carries.
Yeah, you get 1 carry, you get slapped on the leg, and then you carry another 10 yards. We're not going to count that one. I'm sorry.
And that level of success would also have been 3rd best in the league last year. Now, on their very limited carries, both Jacobs and Lloyd were better. Basically 1 carry each.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
6 and 5.
Here's my question though. So I think we can definitely say, maybe not definitely say, I feel comfortable saying that right now Wilson in this game at least, and at the end of last year, looked like a better runner, a more explosive runner than Dillon. How, let's say Wilson continues to look substantially better as a runner on the ground. How close does it, or how much better does Dillon have to be as a pass blocker and a pass catcher? Where it's we know that Wilson's a better runner, but we just need to stick with Dillon because he's so much better at these other smaller things.
I thought you were going to reverse the question. How much better does he have to be as a runner to pass Dillon?
It's the same idea. You can answer it either way.
I think he has to be substantially better as a runner than Dillon to pass Dillon's, what's interesting is his pass catching prowess, which was something that
was a big question mark
coming out of college because they just didn't try it. And his pass pro. Now, there are clearly multiple plays where Wilson had more running room than Dillon did on any of his 4 carries, but he still seemed to find creases when the blocking wasn't great and pick up a couple of yards, even, go forward for like 1 or 2 or 3. Now, one thing I wish they had done was go back to Dillon later in the game to give him a few more chances to carry the ball. He was in for some pass pro. He was in the later plays and didn't get, I think so, unless I totally screwed up. May have looked again, but just to give him a couple carries, to give him a little more work. a chance so we could they could see how he's going, give him a little confidence. I want him to let us see how he's doing.
Yeah,
since they're not letting any video how to practice.
Yeah, because I guess, but just to circle back really quick one more time to the pass pro thing. Dylan's a lot better at that than Wilson is, and he's a lot better pass catcher than Wilson is. If he's 70% as efficient as Wilson is on the ground, I think they're going to go with Dylan, just because they trust him to be able to be a more well-rounded player and, protect the quarterback. And the passing game is more important than the running game just overall. And just to pair better with Jacobs, I think. Because even if Wilson is that much better, as he showed on Saturday, than Dylan, I think they're still going to go with Dylan. So it's almost like I think it might not even be worth like as much oxygen as it's taking up right now. I don't know if you agree with that.
You say we've already used up all the oxygen. We've exceeded our oxygen levels.
I just think
the space shuttle is doomed.
I just think I watch Wilson run and I'm like, man, like he looks just so much more explosive. He's creating more for himself, and obviously there's more room for Wilson out there than Dylan, which we've said. But it's like if you're a minus in pass protection and if you're a slightly below average pass protector and a slightly below average like pass catcher, I just don't think that it really matters if you're that much better of a runner to this version of this team right now, at least.
Yeah, things will play out, but I would like to see more opportunities for both and see what's going on rather than just...
It's a bit of a logjam at the position, huh?
Also. It's a little bit of a logjam, but it'd be nice to see with their own eyes.
Yeah,
how they look in easier to compare
context.
Scenario.
Yeah, but anyway, anything else on the running game, on Wilson, on the run blocking that you wanted to touch on, or should we move on to my first one? Since you've been taking up the time so far, you went back to back.
I wouldn't say that I have talked non-stop here.
That's fair. That's fair.
But why don't you go to your point?
Okay, my point. The thing that I found most interesting overall was definitely the offensive line depth chart. On that game against the Browns. This was something that we were keeping an eye on. And from my eye, I actually feel, it's just one preseason game. Like we said, none of their front four playing, yada, yada, yada. I feel better about it after this game, though, than I did coming into it. After this game against the Browns, I would currently rank it, Ryan and along the interior, Ryan and Monk as like probably the first two backups, and then a bit of a gap, and then Newman. And then along the exterior at the tackle spots, I would go Dillard, then Telford, then Jones. Prior to this, I probably had Telford ahead of Dillard. But starting off, like I already talked about, Sean Ryan was my standout for that one. No pressures allowed, 26 pass blocking snaps. But Monk was really solid as well. PFF didn't really like him as much as a pass protector as they liked Ryan, where they had him down for 2 pressures and a hit in 27 pass blocking snaps. But I thought he flashed a lot. He had 11 snaps at left guard, 17 at center, 33 at right guard per PFF. He was, what did Luke Butkus say? He said he came into that game with a look on his face like he wanted to bite someone's lips off, which I have never heard before in my life. I don't know where that's an idiom from, but I love it. He was so fired up after every single play out there, and I thought he looked really good just mobility-wise as a run blocker. I think run blocking is where he flashed. I think he needs some work in pass protection, but I think maybe, looking forward, he's a really exciting prospect because we know, Josh Myers, the team obviously loves him, but he's on the last year of his deal. Maybe possibly he could be the center for 2025 because he showed really well in terms of his ability to reach block as a center. The one thing at center, though, he had a couple different low snaps where the ball was hitting the quarterbacks in the knees. That's not ideal. Obviously, you're going to hope he can work on that. He's a bit of an older prospect, so you wonder how much more growth there is to really be had there, but something to just keep an eye on going forward. But I just thought he really looked like Jacob Monk looked really good. We already talked about Sean Ryan looking really good. Monk pulled out with Sean Ryan on that run I was talking about earlier with Wilson and, was really fired up after play. Threw one guy just straight to the ground earlier in the game. I mean, he looked really good at all 3 spots as a blocker, even despite some of the snapping issues. And then Andre Dillard also was not bad. Like we said, a little going against backups. But PFF had him actually as their second highest graded pass blocker in all of preseason week 1. He had 33 snaps at left tackle, 3 at right tackle. He did not look as good at right tackle as he did at left tackle, to be fair. So My question, I guess, there is maybe, is he not really a true swing tackle? Because, ideally a swing tackle is able to back up either spot. Is he just a backup left tackle? Maybe. But there's still value there if he can be, a decent backup left tackle. Now, we know he really struggled with Tennessee last year, and that is what it is. It's in the past, but I mean, it's not exactly that far in the past. It was just last season. But could he be, a serviceable backup left tackle? I think coming out of this game, I feel better about him than I did going into it, at least, Dad. And I know you had the tackles down there as something that you wanted to talk about. Do you want to just go right into that and what you thought about the tackle play?
Yeah, I could just jump in because I was thinking specifically about the swing tackle. And so you went into Dillard a lot. And I thought he may have had his best day of camp in this game against the Browns after really struggling in the first week or two where he was getting just crushed by
that first week,
Rashawn Gary.
That first week of camp where he was the starting right tackle when Zach Tom was still recovering from that torn pec, I was like, wow, he might not last the week. They might move on from him right now.
Yeah, that first week did look like he might not make it out of. But so he looks good. So he's moved up my sort of swing tackle ranking right now, and I have him on my, I guess you'd say my initial 53, my first one of the season. I have him now.
First of many.
Team. If I had done it a week ago, I probably would not have had him on the team. I felt he looked the best of the possible swing tackle options. I thought Telford really struggled early, missed blocks in the passing game and run game before settling down later against the deeper backups. He ended up by PFF 371st in the league in that game in run blocking grade. So
that's not great, is it?
Out of 371st.
371st
out of 382 in run blocking grade.
Oh man, that's not great.
Amongst offensive linemen.
Yeah,
so that was rough.
He was a bit of I think he was probably the number one culprit on those Dillon runs where there was just nothing there. It was a couple where it was Telford where it just missed his guy.
Get the job done.
Yeah, he just didn't quite get the right angle on the guy. He just let him get underneath his pads and inside of him, and then all of a sudden Dillon's running straight into a Browns defender. But yeah,
he was better in pass blocking. His pass blocking grade was above average. But his run blocking grade was rough, and he missed it several times. Later in the game, though, you saw him like bulldozing people and coming across. Though I think there was a play where he actually bulldozed people, but he probably would have been better off blocking the guy to his right and not going in and double teaming the guy to his left, because the guy to his right then came inside of the tight end to disrupt the play. Now, and then the next one that we've been considering, Caleb Jones in pass blocking grade, he was 324th out of 380. And 174th in run blocking grade.
Yeah.
He was, I think,
it hasn't been, they've kept him on the roster the past few years. They're clearly high on him, as a prospect. He's struggled with his health mostly. But
especially last year.
Yeah, but it's been, we might be coming to the end of the road on the Caleb Jones experiment. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. And then the next guy we haven't heard much of from camp so far. And he didn't get that. He got 16 snaps, I think. Travis Glover. Now, he's coming in late in the game, so every time, the later you come in the game, the easier, the lower in the depth chart your opponent usually is.
That's fair, but he's a rookie 6th rounder, and he's probably going against other rookie 6th rounders, so he's going against guys who have similar pedigrees to him.
Right, but to say he excels in those snaps is maybe not the same as saying somebody excels in earlier snaps.
Certainly.
But he looked decent in pass blocking, and not so good in the run. Though I thought he had actually a nice lead block ahead of Howard in the fourth quarter, 2 minutes left. He did a good job in the run game on that particular play, which, if you want to say, what is somebody's ceiling or potential as opposed to their overall score for the game, I think he showed something there for run blocking.
Can I ask you a 100-foot view question? What do you?
Sure, my vertigo is not as bad as your uncle's.
What do you think about this? Change of approach in terms of going after really big tackles over the past 3 years, because it seems like with Caleb Jones, Kadeem Telford, now Travis Glover, they kind of seem to, at least with the later round picks, moved away a little bit from what had been working for them, which was taking guys who have really good movement skills, but are maybe a bit more finesse guys and maybe need to put a little bit of weight on, guys like Zach Tom, guys like, David Bakhtiari. They've kind of pivoted a little bit to, Josh Nijman as well as another example of another huge guy that they've had some success with. They've kind of pivoted to going like, oh, what if we just get these massive tackles?
That is a very interesting point because they are, in some ways, ignoring their own success. Because and the success across the league of kind of tackles who become all pros are not necessarily the hugest guys. Now, they have picked up a bunch of really large guys as like free agent signees.
Yeah.
Valdir, what's his name? The guy who looked vaguely like
Ricky Wagner?
Bakhtiari.
Not Rick Wagner.
Not Wagner. The year after Wagner.
I know exactly who you're talking about. He played for the Titans for a long time.
And
Dennis Kelly?
Dennis Kelly. There
yes, I didn't
Dennis
even
Kelly.
have to Google that. I pulled that one right out of my brain.
Nowhere.
No, not out of you nowhere, because I was right. Out of my brain.
Out of your brain.
But yeah, he did look like Bakhtiari. That's right. But yeah, like I said, they're going for these bigger tackles, which is a bit surprising.
Yeah, and we talk about whether any of these guys are going to relive the Josh Nijman experience. Now, let's not forget, Josh Nijman. He was big. He was 6'6 3/4. Not that heavy, though, only 314. But his RAS was 9.8.
Yeah, he was not just big. He was big and a freak athlete.
Freak out. It's like, it always boggles my mind. It's like, how was this guy not drafted? Regardless of what he had done in college. At over 6'6 and a 9.8 RAS. How did he become an UDFA? What was the league doing? As opposed to Telfort and Caleb Jones, their RAS are both under 2.
Yeah, and Glover's is pretty low as well, right?
Glover's is 4.71.
Yeah, so also pretty low. But pretty low still.
Yeah, below average, but not as low.
But yeah, so I just think it's interesting that they're going for all these supersized tackles when previously they had not done that. And they just keep seeming to bet on these over and over again. And it worked with Nijman, but he was also a freak athlete. And it's worked for other teams, but it's interesting to me. I don't know.
Yeah, you say that their investment is low. And
True.
They're just trying to see if something they can strike some magic.
Yeah, but the thing is, when you get these supersized guys, and I don't want to, maybe we can end it here, but they don't have positional versatility. Like when you get a massive Caleb Jones, a massive Josh Nijman, a massive Kadeem Telfort can play a little bit of guard, but guys like Caleb Jones, Josh Nijman, they're not going to be able to play guard. Like, so they're going to either go to tackle and be good, or they're just not going to be able to play in the league. I don't know. It's just something I'm kind of just like thinking about in terms of just a, team building strategy type point of view. It's just interesting that they've pivoted a little bit there. But yeah, anything
you would
else?
say that the player that they've kind of fits their mold that they've added this year, who we haven't had a chance to see yet, is Donovan Jennings.
Yeah, exactly. Who they signed to a pretty hefty UDFA contract.
8.93 RAS.
I'm excited to see him.
Slightly shorter arms.
Yeah.
Good athlete. So this kind of fits, like, in terms of their averages for who they draft, he's like right on a lot of the things they get.
Yeah, and he's unfortunately missed time with 2 different stints with a knee injury. I don't know if it's unclear if it's the same knee, but that's obviously never ideal. But he's back working in a limited fashion now, so hopefully he can, capitalize and maybe make it back for these last 2 preseason games and maybe, do what Rasheed Walker did a few years ago, where you just play well enough in one preseason game that they're like, oh, this guy's pretty good. We got to keep him. And then just build on from there. But Dad, anything else on that swing tackle position? Any thoughts on, Dillard maybe just being a backup left tackle and not being a backup right tackle? Any thoughts on that? Or
I think I think they can get away with it, and they probably think so as well because of the versatility of their other players. That they could afford to have somebody who's less versatile because they can shuffle other people around.
Okay,
if they need to.
They do a little as Jigsaw says, let's play a game. Let's say, Zach Tom, morning of, can't play. Knock on wood, this doesn't actually happen. But let's say morning of the game, Zach Tom can't play.
Explosive intestinal problem.
Yeah, diarrhea, can't play.
First,
anyway,
short term thing. He goes out to dinner with Lamar Jackson.
How are you organizing the offensive line on short notice there?
So if that's the case, maybe what you do is you could go with Morgan out of right tackle.
He's never played there before. Just for reference, he's only ever played left tackle and then now some right guard.
So probably, if it was up to me, I'd probably go Jenkins at right tackle and bring in Sean Ryan.
I think I would do the same. I think I would go Walker, Sean Ryan, Josh Myers, Jordan Morgan, Elton Jenkins. I think that's like where I would feel the best about.
What I'd feel, most comfortable with.
Rather than bringing in someone like Dillard to play a position that he's not as, comfortable with, or bring in Telfort, who's just, a tier or two down as a player.
I would say the other thing you would do is Dillard at left tackle and Walker at right tackle. Though Walker really has only played right tackle in the preseason.
Yeah, and only like a handful of snaps, but maybe he I mean, it's not to say he can't do it. It's just we haven't seen it in a little while. But yeah, so that was the other one I was thinking about. But I do like the Elton Jenkins at right tackle a little bit more, even if that's maybe not as natural a position for him either. But just something I'm thinking about. But anyway, swing tackle stuff. Anything else you wanted to touch on there? Or should we move on to our next one? We're going a little slow today. We're taking our time on these. We're taking our time on these.
Do we like put this record at the wrong speed?
We've gotten a little out of rhythm. Don't talking about games.
You can always crank it up to 1.8x.
That's nothing.
Too slow for you. That's already like.
I listen on 2.3 now. Not to flex or anything. I listen on 2.3 now. But yeah, no, I just have too many podcasts to listen to. Where if I listen to them on 1.8, I'm just not going to finish them all.
That is one of the main reasons why I do it. Yeah, then you get used to it. Then it's like,
no, I can't listen on one times at all. One times just sounds wrong to me. Like if I listen to a live stream on YouTube, we're totally off the rails here. When I listen to a live stream on YouTube, people sound weird to me because I have to listen to them, at a one-time speed. It just doesn't sound right to me.
So if you actually talk to somebody on the phone, it's like, who you haven't,
okay,
boy, you don't sound like you sound so different on the phone.
I know, right? Yeah, it's like, no, I'm just so used to what their voices sound like because it's like, it's pitched up a little bit when it's going faster. Everything sounds weird. But anyway, I'll move on to my next one here, though, since you didn't say you had anything else you wanted to talk about. And that is the defensive front seven.
Anything else relevant anyway?
The defensive front seven. I was really impressed by the front seven, specifically run defense, with the caveat that, Browns are playing 3 backup offensive linemen, weren't playing their starting quarterback, weren't playing their starting running backs. Fair enough. Specifically, though, Isaiah McDuffie. I just think he's seeing the field so well right now. He was blowing up plays, running sideline to sideline. He was only credited with 2 tackles and 1 stop, but I think just overall, he was taking on blockers really well, which is always a question mark with a guy his size and a guy with his arm length, with shorter arms. I just thought he looked really good. Lucas Van Ness, like we talked about, had a really good day. He was my player of the day on defense. Devontae Wyatt looked unblockable. He had 2 pressures and just 6 pass rush snaps. I mean, and he was beating their starting center, like soundly beating their starting center. They had their starting center in there. He did have 1 missed tackle, but he needs to work on finishing plays. That's something we know about him, but hopefully, that's just, a little blip. But the whole front seven, I just thought looked really good out there, especially the starters. And then especially I just wanted to shout out Isaiah McDuffie because he's a guy who I think I've been pretty high on, over the last couple of years. I've been like, well, let's try McDuffie out there. Like he looks pretty good in run defense, there's some limitations when things are happening behind him. But when he's able to just see ball, get ball, fly sideline to sideline, take on blockers, try and split blocks, I think he's a very solid player out there.
I thought he looked really good. I think he looked like he was making impact on the plays aggressively, short tackling. I thought very effectively, short-handedly, short-armedly. Yeah, I liked it. He was like looking like the best linebacker on the field.
Certainly the most impactful over the course of his snaps. I think he played a few more snaps than Walker did. I think Walker just did that initial set of snaps. But yeah, no, I'm a little bit excited about McDuffie. And he was even getting some, national people tweeting about him. Nate Tice of Yahoo Sports Now, previously of The Athletic, was tweeting about, he's like, not this, because he knows who Isaiah McDuffie is. He's like, Isaiah McDuffie's looking pretty good in this preseason game. I was like, yes, he is. There are dozens of us. Isaiah McDuffie fans.
I did actually see that tweet. There are dozens of us here.
But yeah, no. So I was really happy with the front seven. Slayton looked pretty okay, solid. I wonder if Wyatt has any chance of taking that role. I guess we'll see. Brooks, I didn't really notice Brooks too much, but we'll see going forward. There's a lot of time still in the rest of the offseason, and Van Ness looked good. Gary and Preston only played like a few snaps each. So, but anyway, any other thoughts on the front seven, Dad, or did you think they played well? I didn't really notice anything Bari either, but there's a lot of time there.
Yeah, I saw at times where he's like trying to chase the after Huntley. He just didn't have the athleticism to try to catch Huntley on the run.
Yeah, which is something he was actually really good at last year, was defending bootlegs. Like, that was probably actually his best skill last year as an edge rusher. And Huntley got him a few different times on that one. So, and I think Jameis got him too. But it is what it is.
I thought Wood made some plays
Mm-hmm.
as well. He looked good, maybe a little better than he did last year.
He's looking thicker for sure. He looks bigger than he did last year.
And Brooks was, I think, in on a couple plays too when they were playing. But so I think we've got some good depth. And it looks like they're switching things out a little bit. I don't know if like they had Wyatt start one of the practices this week when it had been almost all Slayton. I think today might have been Slayton and yesterday was Wyatt.
Yeah, I hope we see going forward a little bit more Wyatt, just because I think the ceiling is so much higher for him. And, you invest a first round pick in him, I feel like, his, underlying metrics in terms of like pressure rate, win rate are always really good. And I'm just like, what would he do if you just gave him some more snaps in a scheme where all he has to do is just get upfield? That's all you have to do.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is if they do that,
what do you do with Slayton? Can Slayton even play? Like,
then you wouldn't put Wyatt in for that job and take Kenny out. Unless you're just giving Kenny a rest. So then you would have Wyatt have that job and Kenny doing a little bit more of the Slayton job.
Yeah,
for me, Wyatt to do that.
For me, I do agree. It does not let Kenny be as dynamic of a player, but I think just in this scheme, I think it's just the way we think about the D-line and their roles is just a little bit different now than it was previously, where no matter whether or not you are like the traditionally the nose, you're still trying to get upfield and get to a half man and get upfield on them rather than, being a plugger. So I think even if you had Kenny, playing in Slayton's spot and you had Wyatt playing in Kenny's spot, I think that doesn't limit the dynamic opportunities for Kenny in this defense, at least as we have been, told to understand it.
Yeah. Also, to contradict what I just said, one of the things you're thinking of is not how you get the best play from, your individual players, but how you get the best team out there. And so
I think it's a fair argument both ways, though. You want to set up your best players for success, but you also want to have your best 11 out there.
You want to have, best 11 as in not necessarily the best 11 individual players, but the 11 players who give you the best defense.
Yeah. But the question is, if you can set up your number one A guy, which Kenny's probably the best player on that D line, maybe it's Gary, but if you can set them up for greater success by making their job as easy as possible, does that, having that blue chip talent have an easy job where they have an easier matchup? Is that better for the overall defense than having, him have a fine job and then the other guy have a fine, easy job and they're both having, a relative amount of success, but there's not one that's just being totally dominant? I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you're talking about when the defense is trying to beat the offense. Do you only need one guy to get in the backfield and wreck shop to completely blow up a play? Often. Yeah. And I think what we saw is Wyatt chased the quarterback into Van Ness.
Yeah.
So Wyatt didn't get the credit for the sack, but he made it happen.
Exactly. And that's a good point. Is he was pretty much the reason that Van Ness got that sack, because I can't remember if it was Jameis or Huntley at that point, but he just ran straight into Van Ness's arms and Van Ness just hugged him and fell down. And he was like, yep, that's the sack. We'll take those. But anyway, yeah, I thought the front seven looked really good though. Just to kind of wrap things up there. Dad, you have one more? You got one more thing you want to talk to us about?
A little bit more about the wide receiver depth chart. So I talked about a little bit in player of the game about how good Dubose looked in the game. But he's also, reports are that he's looking really good in the rest of training camp. And it seems like he's maybe ahead of Heath for wide receiver 6.
I think so.
Is he threatening Melton?
That's the question.
He was third with yards per route run with 3.47 behind Wicks's ridiculous 65 yards per route run. Yeah. I don't know if that's some kind of record.
One play, one snap, 65-yard touchdown.
And Hicks with 5.75. Last year, the regular season leader was Melton at 2.83 yards per route. Now, Heath did have a game in last year's preseason with a higher yards per route run than Dubose did in this game. But it seems like he's going to need to keep doing that again to beat out Dubose for the way he's playing. And one of the things that has been Heath's calling card is,
blocker.
Goon.
Great blocker. Yeah.
as LaFleur calls them, he likes to have his goon receiver who's there doing blocking and doing the dirty work. And apparently, from Jason Vrabel via Matt Schneidman, that LaFleur showed a couple of clips of Grant DuBose blocking Saturday to the team to demonstrate, model plays. And we've seen him make plenty of nice catches this preseason, but it's that aspect of his game that will earn him a roster spot. And the quote from LaFleur is, "No block, no rock." And everybody wants the rock.
That's fair.
So those things also, suggest that DuBose is moving up that wide receiver depth chart. And he's a guy we liked coming out in the draft. Is unfortunately last year, his season never really got started with a preseason injury. And so he's kind of behind the 8-ball, behind schedule from the start.
Yeah, and the only thing, they took DuBose in the 7th round. They signed Malik Heath as an undrafted free agent. So clearly, as prospects, they probably like DuBose a little bit more. The only thing, though, in terms of, being a goon, being a blocker, Heath's a little bit bigger. Heath is about 10 pounds heavier based on just, their combine measurements, about 10 pounds heavier. And his arm length is like 67th percentile, whereas DuBose's is like 45th percentile. So he's a heavier guy, he's stronger, and he's got longer arms. So I don't know if it's like, does that necessarily mean he's going to be a better blocker? No, not necessarily, but he's, has the physical profile of being a better blocker than DuBose.
Yeah, but reports are DuBose is doing the job. So.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, and that wide receiver depth chart is interesting because I do think, Bo Melton had a tough day against the Browns on Saturday, a couple of drops, had that fumble. It's just one preseason game. We've seen what he can do in regular season games. I'm not really that worried about it.
I don't think this game is going to be held against him.
Yeah, but it's, if it keeps moving that way, I think there is definitely a chance that DuBose can get his way into that 5th receiver conversation. And it's just something to keep an eye on going forward. But anyway, my last takeaway from the game against the Browns is the defensive backs. Like you said, Evan Williams was your player of the game on defense. I had a great day. That one forced turnover that the Packers had on the day was him. 5 solo tackles, didn't miss a tackle. I thought Bullard was really good as well, though. 1 target for 1 reception for 5 yards on 13 coverage snaps. That's pretty good. He almost had a pick. He almost had one. If the receiver hadn't tipped it, he also almost knocked himself out on the play. But he did. He would have had it if the guy hadn't tipped it.
That was why it's second pressure in a row, forcing the early throw. And Cedric Tillman, I think, got his left hand on it.
Yeah,
diving for it. That kept it from going into Bullard's hands.
Yeah, so I thought Bullard looked really good as well. And then the other thing is, like, I won't say that Keyshawn Nixon struggled because it was such a small sample size. He didn't play very much, but 2 receptions on 2 targets for 21 yards per PFF. There was one play where he was lined up in man coverage on the outside receiver. I'm not really sure why that was happening. And I just wonder, I've been wondering this for a little while now. Would the defense be better / have a higher ceiling with Evan Williams as the safety 2 and Bullard as the slot corner, where, he played for Georgia 2 years ago. He was pretty much only a slot corner for them. So he's used to playing that spot. It wouldn't be that big of a change for him. Nixon apparently does not think so. He tweeted, I think yesterday, quote, "Lol, I'm the nickel, get over it," end quote, on Twitter. So I don't know if that would cause, a rift in the locker room if they wanted to, try Bullard at that spot. Nixon apparently thinks that he should be the starter no matter what. We'll see going forward. But
I think this is part of the
corner mentality,
or corner mentality, also like social media.
Yeah,
like all you people out there who have no idea what it's like to be out here.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't need to hear opinions of people like us.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. But I'm just wondering.
Dylan had kind of a similar take as well.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a very fair point. Like, we're just people talking into a microphone. Our opinion at the end of the day does not matter as much as the coach's opinions do, as much as the players' opinions do. But I will say, I was not that impressed with Nixon in coverage, last year. We can talk about, his ability as a tackler at the nickel spot, his ability as a run defender. I think, he brings a lot of value there. I just have question marks about the coverage, and I just think that Bullard fits better in terms of being a plus run defender and being better in coverage. And then you also are able to get Evan Williams on the field. So I don't know. It's just something I'm keeping my eye on. What are your thoughts on that one? And then I did have one other little bit I wanted to talk about for the defensive backs.
Yeah, I think the Nixon outside
should not happen.
Doesn't work. He struggled in practice against like Watson and other players as well. I think they're just doing some cross training to see what people can do and to give people a little bit of a little more experience in case of emergency.
I hope that that's what it was, and not just the offense manipulating through motion, like to get Nixon to the outside. Because if that's the case, then your defense should not be able to be manipulated that easily. And it's it's vanilla, it's preseason, so I'm not going to worry about it too much.
Because they've also been doing that in within the team practices. They've had Nixon outside a couple of times. I think they're working Valentine inside some.
Yeah,
to see what players can do where,
which is fair.
Try to get the best fits.
Speaking of Valentine, though, and that's with a B as in boy, not Valentine, I am also interested in the Robert Rochelle versus Kalen King versus Corey Ballantyne battle, which they seem to be battling for either 1 or 2 spots right now. Rochelle had a nice day, and he's probably the best special teamer of them. But Corey Ballantyne has probably put the best tape in terms of like NFL corner tape out there. He looked pretty solid last year when called upon for the Packers. And then Kalen King probably has the highest ceiling and is the most versatile in terms of inside out versatility, even though, we've seen Ballantyne get some work at both. But King, profiles as probably a better slot corner, and then he also played outside in college, so maybe he can do both. And there's not enough room for all of them, unfortunately, and so I'm keeping an eye on going forward, how is that battle going to shake out? Because oftentimes when you are the 6th, 7th corner, you're going to have to be a main contributor on special teams. Rochelle's like, that's me. Kalen King, hey, you just took me in the 7th round, and a lot of people thought I was going to be a 2nd rounder the year before. You might have gotten a steal with me. Don't you want to see what you have? Yeah, definitely. And then Corey Ballantyne's probably like, hey, I've actually played NFL football. I looked pretty dang good last year. You should pick me. And so I'm like, hey, I would love to have all of these guys on the team, but there's just not enough room for all of them.
Yeah, for me in my first 53, it came down to like Ballantyne versus a 4th tight end.
Yeah. And
that was the decision. And so which either like 26 defenders and 24 offensive players or 25 of each.
So can I just ask, just out of curiosity, which 4th tight end, Tyler Davis or Ben Sims?
Davis. I now have Davis and Wilson.
Over Sims?
Over Sims.
I would not do that off of one preseason game. I think Sims showed a little more last year, but I guess we'll see. There's always a few surprises.
You can say I'm insane.
We didn't learn that today, is all I'm going to say. But anyway.
Just because you already knew doesn't mean you... Just because you had crib notes for this test.
Any final thoughts on this Packers-Browns game, or should we each just leave off here with one thing that we're looking at going forward for the Broncos this week?
Yeah, we could jump ahead to little things we're looking for the next game.
I think we got one thing.
Practice in the game.
Yeah, one thing each for these joint practices against the Broncos / preseason game. What's your one thing going forward that you're going to be keeping an eye on specifically?
You mean, can I say besides the fight count, which I think they're trying to reduce?
Okay, over-under, quick over-under 1.5 fights. What do you got?
Now, it looks like they're not going to be having one-on-one
wide receiver DB. Yeah, that's why the line moved down to 1.5, and isn't it 2.5? Because
so that's
the line might have been 3.5 if the wide receivers and corners were doing one-on-one.
That seems to be the worst. That's why they got rid of it, actually, is because this is where all the fights break out in the corner versus wide receiver one-on-ones.
But anyway, what's your over-under, 1.5?
Oh, I'll go under.
Okay. All right. I hope so.
So the main thing I'll be looking for in for the week against Broncos practice and the game is, does Pratt grab the QB2 job? I mean, he looked better. I thought he looked better in game 1 and has reportedly been making plays in practice. And Clifford has gotten better recently, but he really struggled at the beginning of the preseason.
Yeah, and he looked pretty solid, I would say, in that preseason game. But Pratt looked pretty good too. And this week we've actually seen a little bit of a shift. I think that gap is closer than it's been before. But Pratt has gotten some reps with the 2s in closing periods in terms of like 2-minute drill, team drills, red zone drills. We've seen Pratt start to get some reps with the 2s where previously it was pretty much just Clifford. So I do think that gap is shrinking, and that is definitely something to keep an eye on there. For me, the one thing I'm going to keep my eye on is, can we get a bounce back from A.J. Dillon, or are we actually going to start having some real, running back conversations? That's going to be the one I'm keeping my eye on. We kind of talked about it already, but I think it is the most interesting position battle left. Not most interesting, but I think it's the most, could change in the matter of a week if things go a certain way.
Yeah, I really want to be able to see it with my own eyes. We've been hearing the reports
that Dillon's looking really better, but we have not seen it. Yeah, so we need to see it in a game, I think. But anyway, they're going to be. I think the idea is they're going to be playing fewer starters,
But there are still certain players that I would still want to see more tape of.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But anyway, any final things that you want to touch on, Browns-wise, Broncos-wise, or should we get on out of here?
I guess so. I don't know. Do you know? Have they heard anything about how many starters the Broncos are going to be playing? Because the Browns didn't play very many.
I have not heard.
And I don't know yet about the Broncos. So that it would be nice to have some tough competition.
Yeah, I think
in terms of, but I don't know.
Obviously, just a complete guess. But I do think
Nix is going to be playing.
Yeah, but I was going to say complete guess. I'm imagining they're going to use the practices as most of the reps, and then I'm going to guess they're not going to play that much in the game since they have the joint practice.
Yeah, and I think LaFleur actually said something to that effect as well.
Yeah. So, but anyway, keep your eye tuned here because we'll be talking about that next week. Talking about how the joint practices looked, how the game looked. But yeah, keep your eye tuned here. We'll be doing an episode every single week for the rest of the offseason. And then once the season kicks up in earnest, we'll be doing 2 a week, a pregame and a postgame for every single game. So keep your eyes tuned to your feed. Subscribe on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Come follow us on Twitter once again at FatherSonPacker. But yeah, everything Titletown right there on Twitter, right there in your audio platform of choice. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.